Welcome to the first ICPA Gathering. Thank you so much for being here and making this event possible. I am Shtulman. I'll be your MC for this weekend, and I'm really excited to be here. This has been something that the ICPA leadership and we have planned for the last several months, and we're really excited for this event. I was asked to kind of do an introduction and open the event up, and I've never done anything like this before, so I was struggling to figure out what I was going to talk about. And yesterday, I'm on the plane flying up here, and I realized that the media that I was downloading to try to distract myself on the plane never actually downloaded. And so I either could sit there and watch a little plane icon gently travel up the East Coast, or I can listen to something that I previously had downloaded on my phone, and I only have two things downloaded on my phone. I have the Hamilton soundtrack, and I have Reggie Gold's The Valley of the Blind. And anybody here not familiar with his recording with The Valley of the Blind, his talk? Anybody? Okay. So, first off, I'm not going to do this justice, right? You have to go home tonight after everybody's... But it's a famous talk that Reggie Gold delivered. I think it was a Lyceum. I don't know which school, but it was a talk where he started using H.G. Wells' famous short story, The Valley of the Blind, as a metaphor for the chiropractic profession. And the story goes that there was this remote village in the mountains of Colombia where all of the village had a genetic weakness for their vision. But because the villagers had previously intermarried with other villages, they were able to keep that genetic weakness kind of to the side. Well, one day there was a massive rock slide completely enclosing that valley to the outside world. There was no way to get through. There was no way for that village to be able to connect with anybody else. And as a result, they were forced to intermarry, and they were forced to kind of live this isolated life. And gradually, as they intermarried and had kids generation after generation, that weakness for eyesight became more and more dominant. And eventually, every single child in that village was born completely blind. In fact, generations later, they had lost all concept of sight. They had no recollection, no memory of what sight was. And so they lived this life and found ways to adapt, as humans do, and that was their existence. Well, hundreds of years later, an explorer named Bogota had fallen off of his expedition, and as a result, he was presumed to be dead, and everybody left him behind, and he wandered, lived off of the land for years, trying to figure out how to survive. One day, Bogota found his way between some mountains and all of a sudden discovered this valley. And he saw signs of habitation, signs of life for the first time in years, and he was so relieved, so excited. He started moving towards this village, and all of a sudden he realized there was something different. Everybody in this village, when they were moving, they would walk with their hands out in front of them, and there were strings connecting the buildings and the huts throughout this valley. And he realized, as he got even closer, that everybody had been completely blind. That not only that they were blind, but even the eyes had become vestigial organs, and very few people even had any presence of eyeballs or eye sockets or eyebrows. And he remembered that somebody told him that in the Valley of the Blind, the one-eyed man is king. So he thought, all right, this is my time to shine. And he came in and he started introducing himself and announcing to the world that I'm going to be your sight, I'm going to be able to save you, I'm going to be here to help you. And everybody thought he was crazy. So what is this sight you're talking of? He goes, well, I can, if I look up, I can see the sun, and I can see the sky, and I can see the mountains, and I can see colors. And all of this was completely foreign to them. They had no idea what he was talking about. In fact, they actually thought his views were crazy, that he was a heretic, that he was dangerous. And they ostracized him from the community, keeping him on the outskirts of the village. And that's kind of how he lived, till one day he met one of the girls and he ended up falling in love, and they decided that they were going to get married. But the elders of the village still viewed him as a danger, and they didn't want him to be a part of it. They got together and they said, listen, we think we figured out what's wrong with you. All of this talk of colors and sight and seeing things, the thing that's making you crazy are those soft, spongy areas in your forehead that you claim to be able to see with. And if you want to marry and become part of our village, we have to remove your eyes. And he thought to himself, well, what are my options? I can either live here around other people in the Valley of the Blind, or I can retain my vision and go and be by myself for the rest of my life. And in the end, the night before the ceremony, where he was going to take his eyes out and get married, he decided that he couldn't do it. And he left, and he decided to walk alone for the rest of his life, retaining his eyesight and leaving the Valley of the Blind behind. And Reggie talks about this being a chiropractic story because of the choice so many chiropractors have to make when they graduate chiropractic school and leave the bubble. When they go out into the world, into the Valley of the Blind, and they start talking about this wonderful thing called chiropractic. And they start talking about what we can do and how we can change humanity, and the rest of the world looks at us like we're crazy, like we're dangerous. And he references that too many chiropractors are willing to sacrifice their vision in order to be tolerated in the Valley of the Blind. And that it's the choice of every single chiropractor to make that decision for themselves. And I usually listen to this talk about once a month. It just kind of lights me up. It is one of my favorite talks in chiropractic. And I realized that that's kind of how I grew up in this profession. I'm a second-generation chiropractor, but my dad practiced for 20-some-odd years being tolerated in the Valley of the Blind, sacrificing the vision and the philosophy of chiropractic in order to be accepted by the masses. And he had very much a musculoskeletal therapy type of practice, and that's how I grew up. I got adjusted, but I also got fully was fully vaccinated. And I had antibiotics, and I had all of the things that you would normally expect in the Valley of the Blind. That was my experience. And there were two things that really changed that. When I was in chiropractic school, my first quarter, David Koch, who's the philosophy instructor, stood up at the front of the room holding the bigness of the fellow within. And if you've ever heard me speak, you know I say this at every single time that I get a chance to speak, because I think it's so important. It transformed my understanding of chiropractic. It's chapter 11 of that book called The Inner Power Speaks. And he says, we chiropractors work with the subtle substance of the soul. We release the prisoned impulse, the tiny rivulet of force that emanates from the mind and flows over the nerves to the cells and stirs them into life. We deal with the magical power that transforms common food into living, loving, thinking clay that robes the earth with beauty and hues and scents the flowers with the glory of the air. In the dim, dark, distant long ago, the sun powered to the woo got me off. I have never messed this up. And that woo, totally, I was like, whoa. This inner power spoke, and there was life. It quickened the slime of the sea and the dust of the earth and drove the cell to union with its fellows, producing countless living forms. Through eons of time, it finned the fish and winged the birds and fanged the beasts. Endlessly it worked, evolving its form until it produced the crowning glory of them all. Through tireless effort, it blows the bubble into each individual life, and then silently, relentlessly dissolves the form, absorbing the spirit into itself again. And yet you ask, can chiropractic cure appendicitis or the flu? Have you more faith in a knife or a spoonful of medicine than the innate power that animates the internal living world. Right? So for me, that was the moment that everything changed in terms of chiropractic. It went from being a musculoskeletal therapy, right, just another modality to help people feel better in their life, into something that was transformative to the expression of intelligence in every single cell and every single living being. And it became so much bigger to me about, wow, this is what we can do. This is amazing. And then about 2 weeks later, I was at an event with actually my good friend, Dr. Shannon Good, who you're going to hear later this weekend. And that was the first time that I got to hear Genome. And I never really had like a passion for pregnancy or pediatrics before. But you would be in a room with Jeannie listening to her talk, and it didn't matter where you were in terms of your passion for chiropractic, you immediately wanted to go out and serve pregnant and pediatric populations. It was just this moment. I walked out of there and I turned to Shannon and I said, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. Jeannie was that for so many people here, for every speaker that you're going to hear this weekend. And this event is not meant to be a memorial to her, but it's also something that wouldn't be possible without her. Without who she was for so many of us, without the inspiration she was, without lighting the fire within all of us that has kept this going for so long and continues to go for long after. Not only did the ICPA have to deal with the loss of its matriarch, but we also had to deal with unprecedented times in terms of COVID. And I can't begin to brag enough about the ICPA leadership and the team that have kept this organization not just afloat during these last couple years, but have really allowed it to thrive and adapt to this new world that we live in and make the classes available online, which I can't begin to tell you is an undertaking that nobody here would want to do. So it was possible. So yeah, give it up for them. But the problem with moving to an online format is there's something that's lost. There's something that's special about getting chiropractors together, particularly perinatal chiropractors together in the same room. There's an energy, a connection, something that calls us to be greater than what we are individually, and it's so special. And that's what this event is designed to create. The motto or the theme for this weekend is connect, learn, and inspire. Connect because we wanted to get ICPA members together in an environment that they can spend time with one another, talk, introduce yourselves to your Facebook friends and the people that you otherwise haven't, gotten a chance to meet in person. But because there's an energy that comes together when we come together. And so this event was designed with time set aside for us to be able to socialize, for us to hang out and be able to spend time and talk and lift each other up. It's also meant to tap into the vast knowledge, expertise, and passion that so many of our members have outside of the ICPA curriculum. I am humbled when I look at the ICPA membership and what people are doing in their practices in their communities. And we said, how can we get these members onto an ICPA stage so that they can share with the rest of this organization, the rest of this membership, and show what they're creating? And then how can we inspire one another to take action far greater than we thought was possible? How can we take what we do in our practices and translate it up to a much larger scale? So that's what this weekend is really about. Connecting, learning from one another, and inspiring each other to take forth Jeannie's message and the words that BJ had and bring it to a whole nother place. And I think the ICPA is probably the only place that this can really happen. And here's what I mean by that. It doesn't matter what school you went to. It doesn't matter what technique you practice. It doesn't matter if you incorporate other things into your practice, if you do functional medicine, if you do exercise. What matters is that you believe every single pregnant and pediatric person on the planet deserves access to chiropractic care, and that chiropractic care for the purpose of location, analysis, and adjustment of the vertebral subluxation is inherently valuable and needed across the world. If you stand for that, the ICPA is your home. As BJ's famous epigram says, the path of least resistance makes rivers and men crooked. We have not chosen the easiest path, right? Just by nature of being chiropractors, we have chosen a more difficult path, choosing to leave the valley of the blind and live out our vision. But we also choose to focus on the adjustment of the subluxation, and particularly in a pregnant and pediatric population where the world is, even our own profession, questions the necessity or the value of it. So what we're doing is not easy. It's not easy to shun the rest of the world and their tolerance, to stand firmly in our vision for what we believe and what we know to be true. And the only way that we can make that happen is if we do it together. So that's what this weekend's about. Thank you so much for being a part of the ICPA. Thank you for being here this weekend. And we're going to create some magic this weekend. So.